The city of Baroque and Gothic spires, whose cobblestones were old before the Declaration of Independence, has been a magnet for Americans since the 1989 Velvet Revolution. There are more than 30,000 now. Some come for the city of Jan Hus, Franz Kafka, and Václav Havel. Some come for business. Some come for the freer sex or the cheaper beer. All think they can live like kings in this new Bohemia.
Well, this is a rather unusual location. We are about, 25 meters underground, under a hill in the Žižkov section of Prague. This is actually a nuclear bunker that was built so in the event of a nuclear war that they could continue to have the communications system. You're really inside and secure. We say it's like the safest place in Prague to work, even though sometimes when we come out we don't know if the world will still be there when we open up the door to come outside. But yeah, this is a remarkable space. And the idea that this was the communists, headquarters in the event of nuclear war, and now it's occupied by Americans, a group of entrepreneurs decided to make a private radio station in Prague broadcasting in English. And this was a very bold concept because it's really, as far as I know, the first English language station actually based here. I think it's really extraordinary situation. So I came auditioned, and they really liked what I was doing and put me in.
Good morning, Prague. Yes. And you are tuned to 106.2 FM Radio Metropolis in Prague. Yes. Programming in Prague in English. Yes, in English, the language of Shakespeare, Thackeray, Keats, and Fred Flintstone. Yes, hi, I am Steve Fisher, your host.
I came to Prague in 1991, in October of 91. Before that, I was living in New York City. I'm actually from upstate, small town Albany, the capital of the state. But I lived in New York on and off for 6 years. I was working for an advertising agency. I was vice president of an advertising agency in New York. And a combination of things happened to me, I think, in the summer of 1991. One of them was that the company I was working for at the time, my boss started to go a little crazy. And I think it was the pressure and the money, and this was the beginning of the recession, really the opening of it. And everybody was starting to go really nuts. I started to have a pretty bad feeling about America, I have to say, only because at the time, this was right after the Gulf War in the spring. And although, of course, there was this tremendous threat, I suppose, from Saddam Hussein, and we went in there, it was such a spectacle. And I thought, it feels so wrong to me. The combination of those things really, I think, propelled me to want to find something a little different and to look for it. And here was the Czech Republic, new country, Czechoslovakia then at the time, starting from scratch. It had been a communist country, but now it was going to decide what it was going to be. Was it going to be capitalist? Was it going to be a mix of capitalism and socialism? Here was Václav Havel, a playwright president, and I thought, hey, this could be a country where maybe I could make a difference, where maybe I could be involved in the transformation, bring my experience as an American who's seen the negative effects of capitalism and bring it to here and maybe work with the people. And I had heard so much about Prague that I thought, this is the city.
I think life in Prague is incredibly compelling because everything you would want in the United States is here, which is not in the United States. There are an enormous number of people who you would want to meet who are doing interesting things, fascinating things, artists and politicians who are accessible to you because it's a small country. As a reporter, I appreciate that. There's a slower pace of life. There's public transportation. I'm from Los Angeles. I love public transportation. I love not owning a car dearly. And we're not trapped by things that Americans must be trapped out by, which are enormous financial burdens, mortgages and insurance. I mean, I was 23 in Connecticut, and I had like 4 insurance policies that I had to have just to live. I had friends advising me to get more. It just seemed insane.
I went to a conference on Czech literature at New York University, and I met a bunch of Czechs who live in Prague. One of them is Victor Factor. He's a translator and editor, a very curious, kind man, and he said, "Well, I think you could find some work in Prague. You'd be very useful." I thought, useful? Nobody has ever called me useful for anything. And then I met the current mayor, or the then mayor of Prague, Jaroslav Kožan. And he had been mayor 3 weeks. He was full of post-revolutionary fervor, and I approached him at a cocktail party, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, this guy Victor said I could find work in Prague. Is that true?" And he went, "Come to Prague."
Through 40 years of communism, one American flag still flew over Prague. The embassy banner taunted Moscow's men in the castle on the hill above. Now they have gone, and the Americans have taken root.
The Americans came here in 1990 as volunteers. This was the beginning of it. They came, the Masaryk Foundation created fellowships to teach the English language to Czechs. Georgetown University had a volunteer program. Education for Democracy, which was in Mobile, Alabama, and Toronto, had sent volunteers over, sometimes Czech emigres, but more often just young Americans and Canadians eager to help out in Eastern Europe. A lot of those people stayed, and this became the birth of it.
The Prague Post is American-owned and run, selling 40,000 copies a week in English. It rents offices from a building owned by the Communist Party of Bohemia. Karl Marx's last disciples can make an honest dollar as landlords of the capitalist press.
In our first issue, I did a front-page column. My Prague profile column that time was a profile of us. And in that, I said, we are living in the left bank of the 90s. And this became a rallying cry. I don't know how that first issue, we printed 7,000 copies. It got all over, literally from coast to coast in America, from Halifax, Nova Scotia to the San Francisco Bay Area. People got hold of that and sent me faxes, Federal Express packets with their clippings, and said, "We're coming." First, there were the language teachers, the volunteers. Then there were the people who came to see what they were up to, and because they heard this was a good place. And in this second wave and well into the third wave were the creative types.
Came here about 3 years ago for the first time, right after '89, and I was living in Vienna. I was doing Cats and Les Miserables, and I'd done Romeo and Juliet with George Doyle's theater, and came up here for the weekend and was just totally enamored by it all. It was a gorgeous spring day. The people were really excited about the new things that were happening in the country. I was standing in the city and I said, "Oh, what a gorgeous city. This is the kind of city I would love to live in, not Vienna." And I said, "How could I live here?" And I said, "Well, the only way I could live here is if I did theater." And then I said, "But I can't, I would never be able to speak Czech." You know, and then I said, so I'd have to start an English-speaking theater. And so that's what happened is, yeah.
Stop, can we go back to, that takes half the fun out of it right there, please.
This is the first show where I have mostly Czech actors. And for me it's exciting because that's what the whole point of the goal was, to bring it here for the Czech people, you know, this kind of theater. It's exciting to see them, you know, latch on to it and really, they enjoy it, you know. And there are times when it's so foreign, though, to them, you know, what I say to them and what I ask them to do, because they're very used to their own style of theater. And sometimes I have a little trouble getting across what I want. For the most part, many of the Americans that come here are people that just, they have nothing else to do in the States. When you tell people like that there's a country that is open, it welcomes them, and it's cheap, and the beer is cheap. I don't drink beer, but I've never had Czech beer.
Okay, this is Joe's bar in Prague. And I'm showing pictures here. And this picture was inspired, I painted it like 2 years ago. And it was inspired by a Kate Bush song called Violin. And it was going along with the hair and the sound. I was hanging up the pictures down here by myself, just, you know, it was dark here then, not light like it is now. And when I saw this hole here, this picture just had to go next to it, and now I'm going to make a poster from it, like this. I have to photograph it again, so that the picture and the hole are together. And it goes really nice with the whole, like, theme of the picture, this hole. Over here is a picture that I don't know exactly what it is. That's it. It's called Pink Morning, and that's it.
If this is to be the left bank of the 90s, it will need its Hemingways, Millers, and Fitzgeralds. There's no shortage of volunteers at the Radost Cafe poetry readings.
Lungs of ice, muscles of concrete, buildings cracked like bones. Snow blocks the sky of the city and everyone is sick. Inside 1,000 liquid sounds, noses running, bathtub spilling, soup slurped down charred passageways. Hearts thrash about like crawfish inside tired ice. Soon it will be spring. Water will splash down drain pipes, cover the streets in thin rain like waterfalls following curved stone. Now the stones are frozen, the ground is frozen, and I have been dropped a seedling into foreign soil.
I am a Jew is one of my identities. I am an American. I am a Wynwoodian, which is the town I come from in Pennsylvania, but none of these things are things that I cling to. They are things that I have risen through on my search for all, and Prague has let me be that.
Can I get you something? Are you hungry, ailing? Trapped in a room as small as the earth, all land is foreign, all land is the same, the earth is my home, I live with you. The truth is always both.
I came to Prague to donate my life to the life of a writer. And no matter what that takes and then no matter how long it takes, that was the decision that I made. There are many Czechs that I find unbelievably fascinating, lurching on to this newfound freedom to an incredible degree. I think the young people here are fucking great. They rule the city. They know that they're the first generation in 1,000 years that control their own destiny. They're beautiful. I also see a lot of people that are still chained to a paternal political system, and they don't really know what to do because they don't know freedom. And so, you know, it cuts both ways. Slovenia is next. Slovenia. That's the next hot spot. Really? Absolutely. Jump across the border, hang out in Trieste for a couple nights, jump across the border, 1.2 million people in the whole country, mountains, seaside. It's Slovenia.
Where you go, Ron?
You got the young lawyers from the international law firms and the accountants, the yuppies, we'd call them in America, late 20s, early 30s, people who decided to jump off the usual track of working 120 hours a week as a junior lawyer in the hope of a partnership that nowadays you won't get at the age of 35. So they come here and either start their own firms or creatively or get in with the branches of these firms, and they wind up doing jobs that they would be years away from doing, if ever doing, in the home office. And these people became the glue that brought the left bank of the 90s together.
Hi, I'm Steve Fisher, and you are in the Weekend Cafe on Radio Metropolis 106.2 FM. And be sure to tune in to Radio Metropolis Tuesday night. We're going to be having the Tuesday Night Forum, our regular listener call-in show. And we're going to be talking on Tuesday night about the westernization of Prague. Is Prague becoming too westernized?
This is the American dream of freedom on wheels. An automotive age, traveling on time-saving superhighways. Futurama's free-flowing channels of concrete and steel.
I'm sorry, can you print out for me copies of probably easy way and A3 paper? I studied art. My first degree is in painting from Massachusetts College of Art in Boston. And then from there I went to art history and studied in Pittsburgh and Chicago, University of Bonn for a while. And in the process of that and looking for a dissertation topic, which I wanted to do in modern art, I found out about Prague and the Art Nouveau in Prague. And so in 1977, I came here on some small research grant from the University of Pittsburgh and walked around the city for 3 days with my jaw dragging on the ground. Especially at that time, nobody knew in the United States very much about the art here or the architecture or anything.
We still consider ourselves a young culture, and I know I felt this way even in my first life here in '67. I would look out, and in those days, it might still be happening here, the cobblestones, they were, when it rained, as it just rained, they turned kind of blue, and they would get loose. And in the morning, you would hear workmen, after a rainstorm, hammering them back in. And I would sit and look out my window where I was working, and I would say, that cobblestone is older than the United States of America. And it gave me a sense of craftsmanship. If I could write anything, do anything, never mind this business of glory and publicity, but just do your work and prove, if I could produce anything as enduring as that cobblestone, I would be a very successful artisan, craftsman, whatever you want to call it. And it got me away from the American rat race syndrome of biting my nails and saying, I'm not getting anywhere. And that's been the influence of Prague on me.
I've heard a number of Americans who came shortly after the revolution, in the first year after the revolution, and they speak of themselves as the first Americans, meaning that they were the first to come somehow to Prague. And of course it's not true. There are many Americans coming to Prague before that. But it's interesting that they came with this sense of adventurism, of discovery. Here was some secret new place, this frontier. It has something maybe to do with this frontier part of American character. They came here and then began to interact, whatever their interest was, whether it was in the arts or in business or whatever, and probably did a lot to change the very culture they were making so precious, in the sense that I don't want to say that they destroyed what they came to discover, but they certainly affected it. So now it's not so interesting.
Well, I'm Dave Triscoe, and I am a real estate developer who has worked all of my life in Chicago, Illinois, in those areas. And I came to Prague a little over 3 years ago in April of 1990 with the intention of investigating the possibilities of getting involved in some joint venture reconstruction of the beautiful real estate here, which I was somewhat familiar with. Because of the state of the economy in the United States right now, and in fact, the economy hasn't been so rosy for the past several years, many people think that this might be a wonderful place to come back and do some business. And a lot of them arrive over here without much market research. And I think a goodly number of them end up quite disappointed. I've seen many come and go in the 3 years. Many, many come and go. Probably more go than I thought came to begin with. I saw them on the way out. But it isn't that you can't make money. It's just that this certainly is not a place where you can easily get rich quick. The interesting thing after 3 years to me is that there really aren't more franchises. I actually believe that there would be many here. It doesn't really work very well here because of the fact that Czechs were simply not used to much advertising, and they didn't have much of a concept of brand loyalty. So this isn't a selling prospect so much as an education prospect, and it takes much longer to educate people.
Up there on that Letna plain where they used to have that Stalin statue up there, well, he's gone now. It's kind of vacant. What if we put just like a big Ronald McDonald up there waving to the people as they come across the bridge into the Letna plain? I don't know, maybe 4 years, we'd just do it for that, take the money, and then kick them out, after that. Maybe it's the way that we should handle it.
I have to say that I may be assuming a bit of a Czech perspective on it, because I know that this country needs the money, and there's no way to turn it away. So let's take it now. They're looking for a new name for this country. You know, it's called the Czech Republic, but it's also now called like Czechia and Česko, but people aren't very happy about that. And I say, hey, listen, why not go for it? Why not call it Marlboro country, you know? And just for 4 years, what would Philip Morris pay to have their name on the map, huh, of Europe?
As the would-be Hemingways need cafes and bars for their bohemian lifestyle, Americans have moved in to provide them.
I was at university, the summer was coming up, my last sort of free summer before graduating and going out in the workforce, and it was a toss-up between whether I would go work back out in the bush or come here and drink beer and relax and have a fun summer. So I thought I would come here and see what Prague was like after the revolution.
I decided this was the place to be. And I fully intended to write when I was here, but instead I've wound up doing restaurants and nightclubs, and things are different than they were before.
But I mean, how many times has somebody, or would somebody, walk up to me in Vancouver and say, look, if you've got $10,000, you can buy into a fully equipped restaurant with a liquor license. But at home, it would never happen. Of course not. There's corporations like McDonald's and restaurant corporations that do things like this. Not
entrepreneurs.
Not two guys like us. There's a lot of questions about that the Czechs have about foreigners coming into such a national monument, and running spaces. And we came in here, and the place was wrecked. I mean, it was completely wrecked. All the original silverware, cutlery, everything is gone. I mean, it's completely gone. There's nothing here. It's been wrecked, And now they're going to have to completely reconstruct. We only got a contract for 8 months, so we came in and did sort of a whitewash just to get it open and functional.
It's a lot of hard work. That's where a lot of people miss out here. They miss the community and they miss the opportunities because they think it's all about what kind of cash they can toss around. That's not it.
The thing that I noticed the most is that the attitudes haven't changed much. The majority of the people that we deal with on a business level are still pretty kooky. They're still pretty messed up, burnt, shell-shocked from the 40 years of what.
40 years of totalitarian rule left the Czechs inert spectators while their future was decided in Moscow. The whole federation learnt to obey, to avoid risks, and to be internal exiles in their own country. American capitalism was demonized.
America was the mortal enemy for so long. And to have an American be here was a kind of a kick. It was a kind of a pleasure for Czechs. This is what I know from experience. When I began to work at City Hall, people enjoyed saying, wow, we have an American here. In City Hall, we have the enemy. He's right here, we got him, right? Things are different.
The native population has taken the friendly invasion of the Americans in their stride. After all, throughout their troubled history, the Czechs have been through much worse. In the eyes of their new guests, there are still some very visible scars to prove it.
There was this contrast between the American way of doing things, of that can-do attitude and get that done tomorrow and have that on my desk, when it comes head-to-head with the Central European serpentine way, a little bit of mystification, and compounded by 40 years of communist bureaucracy, of complete absence of personal responsibility. There is an interesting head-to-head explosion.
The work ethic. People are, they were able to adapt to capitalism right away because throughout communism they kept their bourgeois values. They couldn't travel, so they stole from the state and built country houses, the chata, and they even had this saying, who doesn't steal from the state cheats his own family. And they worked at extra jobs, often for hard foreign currency, if they get it. But one of our big problems, since we go to press on Monday midnight for Wednesday, is that it was very hard, still is, to find Czechs who will work on the weekend, because the chata, the country house, became the god.
Somebody's always coming in and taking over here, and they have this kind of passive resistance that turns into a kind of lack of discipline sometimes.
And now it is time for a regular weekend cafe feature from Radio Metropolis, Tips for Tourists. Yes, advice for visitors to the Czech Republic. Today's tip, tourists, if you've been having a problem making a telephone call in Prague, please be patient and don't panic. The Prague telephone system utilizes a sophisticated network of ropes, pulleys, and levers operated by hunchback dwarves working deep beneath the city center. Telephone calls are routed through a complex switching system of tin cans, fishing line, chewing gum, paper clips, semaphore, and hand signals, powered by a combination of kerosene and flashlight batteries. So, if you haven't reached your party by the 50th try, don't give up. Simply book another night in your hotel and keep calling. This has been a public service announcement of Radio Metropolis and the Prague telephone system. The biggest difference, of course, is the difference between the happy American who's, open and positive and will tell you his life story in, 5 minutes, everything you wanted to know, his divorce, his former drug problem, everything about him. But the Czechs, there's much more privacy. And I'm sure, it has to come from having been a communist country for 40 years where you don't talk. You don't talk about yourself. You keep a low profile, and you don't reveal a lot about yourself, and I call it the Czech cool. That there's this real cool that people have.
I think this desire for shortcutting, people who in 1999 are still doing it, who are just looking for the quick buck, who the number of taxi drivers who just just rip you off blindly. You always have to deal with, worry about the waiters ripping you off. It's this feeling of manipulation in many ways. Now, to come from New York City and to complain about being ripped off in Prague doesn't sound right, but there was a mentality. They said, this is the free market. That means I can take as much as I want. It's free.
And now it is time for our regular weekend cafe segment, English words that make Czech people giggle. And yes, that's indeed because in every language there are always words that mean something else in the other language. Today, our English word that makes Czech people giggle is preservative. Yes, preservative. In English, the word preservative, of course, is used to keep food fresh, but in Czech, the word preservative means condom. Yes, that's what they call them, preservatives. So keep that in mind the next time you walk into a restaurant in Prague and sit down and say to the waiter, excuse me, does this food have preservatives? The waiter's going to look and say, no, sir, that's calamari.
Well, my two friends have just arrived from America. Their eyes are bulging out of their heads. I don't know if you talk to them about that, but they go around talking about the beautiful Czech women. And they're so gorgeous, and there's also a sense that they're not only gorgeous, they're available. You could seduce a Czech woman more easily than you could seduce an American woman who might dress in a more masculine way. She seems somehow more like a fortress. She's harder to get to. I think I think that also there's a question of religion, that religion was outlawed here for so long, and many of the sort of young dating population in this country was raised without it, and there isn't sort of like this moral impediment, sort of, thing to stop you from having sex. And the Czech Republic also is known, or Czechs are known for having very liberal attitudes towards sex. You see it in the literature, in books by Kundera and Klima, and my Czech friends acknowledge that, yeah, there's a lot of infidelity here. I mean, the marriage sort of pact is not seen as so sacred as elsewhere. So there's a sense that people, it's possible to have sex with people who you meet, and That's, obviously, absolutely, that's what attracts American men when they come here.
Many Americans come here, I've seen it many times, with a certain arrogance. Oh, we're going to go there and show them how to do things. And that's not a good attitude. Americans have a lot to give. Americans are not, this is sort of the flip side of the coin, Americans are not as superficial as many people in other countries think. There is a richness to American language, to American approach to the arts, visual arts, to literature, whatever. It's a kind of openness and a freedom that does contribute something, can bring some new feeling, some freshness.
You understand? Someone will die for what they believe.
My name is Christopher Nisperos.
What do we call it?
And
for example, there is
a teacher of English here in Prague now. My major experience has been in the photography industry, selling equipment, teaching photography, seminars.
Martyr, yes. Again in Czech?
Mučedník.
Mučedník. Martyr. Martyr. Everyone. Martyr. Okay.
I don't have a college degree, so I must have some experience in my field in lieu of that. And so I'm here deliberately for a set amount of time to try to get some experience because it looks good on a CV or resume. And I've been here a year. The people are great and so forth, but I'd like to see a little bit of Europe, and to do this it takes some money, and I really can't make enough money in Prague. There'll be an exchange. It's not just American terminology, American language bits coming here, American influences of various kinds, but there will be more Czech influences going back to the States with the Americans that return. Is it bad to have American influence here? I don't know. The Declaration of Independence for the Czech Republic was signed in Philadelphia, so I don't know what to tell you. You know, they have streets named after President Wilson here. The wife of the first president was an American. I think he was influenced.
You think so? Definitely. You think that the Czech Republic should put all of the gypsies in for example, a train?
No, gypsies are spread all over the world, and in some parts of the world I mean, a lot of damages, and in some parts they don't. So it's like, it depends. Everything depends.
But who agrees that the Czech Republic would, Katerina says definitely, the Czech Republic would definitely be better without gypsies. Do you say yes or no?
Yes.
Better.
There's no country that's perfect, so it's not a criticism necessarily of the Czech Republic. Everyone has their people to hate, kind of. I don't mean to say by any of this that it's good, but it exists. So yeah, there's racism here. I mean, it's normal. Unfortunately, it's normal. I get stared at in the metro, and usually I'm aggressive, and my personality, if you can't tell, is kind of gregarious. And if somebody's staring at me, I just stare right back, you know, or possibly say something. But I'm alone here. I don't think. I mean, in a lot of ways, you know, I don't think I would. I avert my eyes if I see a skinhead walking around, especially with things in their hand. They have clubs here. Have you seen these guys with the little mini bats? You know, I know they don't like baseball that much, so it's not cricket. Gee, what are they using them for?
Simon Wiesenthal, who was educated here, he says that the Slovaks were openly anti-Semitic. The Czechs weren't. The only time he felt it was when people, a Czech student would say, call his mother and say, can I bring Wiesenthal to dinner? He's a Jew, but he's nice. And it's more subtle. I know that basically the Czechs are at least as racist as everybody else, but they don't show it as much. It wasn't until well into my first life here, 4 years, that anybody even acknowledged the name Levy was Jewish. And that was in a context where The secret police had seized 65 pages of my book manuscript, and a friend was advising me what to do, a friend well connected with Dubček, and he said, you should make perfunctory protests just in case. And at the time there were three different branches of the police. There was the Federal Ministry of the Interior, the Czech police, and the Slovak police. And I said, well, I guess I'll only make two. I should protest to the Czech Ministry of Interior and the Federal Ministry of Interior. He said, no, you protest to the Slovak too. And I said, why? He said, well, if they took your pages because they were looking into a CIA plot, then it was the Federal Ministry. And if they were looking into the counter-revolution here and thought you were part of that, then it's the Czech ministry. But the Slovak Minister of the Interior, General Pepek, he's in charge of the Jewish conspiracy.
We have books that are only to be found in 5 or 6 books on the European continent. We're sitting in this bookstore in the center of the Jewish ghetto, the old town, the Jewish cemetery, the historical ancient cemetery, and the synagogue is just a block away. I've traveled the world. I've lived 20 years in the Pacific Rim. I can only say that Prague draws people. It's a magnet. I'm not the only person that has this instant love affair with the city. The first thing I noticed when I came, having been a book lover, was the lack of English language bookstores or books available. There were, as I recall, almost 80 bookstores in Prague. And that's something, to me, was a phenomenon that I found sometimes an amazing thing. At the time of the revolution, there were 80 million books sold that year, the previous year, to a country of about 15 million people. And another 80 million books were in circulation in the library system of this country. Now that's amazing. The wonderful thing about the Czechs is their love for books. They're the most literary people I've ever known. So the books that I brought to the country were the English language books that were missing, and in particularly the visual books. We try to support here as many of the writers, the young poets, the young literary people that are, and some of the middle-aged people that are coming here to write. Alan Levy, who everybody knows in the American community, is a marvelous person and a great contributor to the scene here in his work with his writings. People like George Bauer, who's written a book, Letters of Prague. Hannah Greenfield, who was living here and has some stories and tales to tell about her past. Deborah Dubois with her One Eye Open, her wonderful book, her feminine approach to the literature of the area.
I started a dialogue with several different people about the status of feminism and the status of women's rights in the Czech Republic. And there just wasn't any comprehensive, all-inclusive way for women to voice their opinions without fear of reprisal, because there is a tremendous fear here of voicing your opinion. And it's because they were punished under the communist regime for doing so. Definitions that are associated with feminism here in Central and Eastern Europe are very different than the definitions and the sort of basic ideology that feminism has in the Western part of the world. And so, one of the main tenets of Western feminism is emancipation and the opportunity and the choice to work outside the home. Whereas under the communist regime, women here were forced to work outside the home, socially and economically. And not only were they forced to work, but they were still treated as second-class citizens outside the home and expected to carry the full burden inside the home. And so there was a backlash and a resentment towards this so-called emancipation, which was very different than the emancipation in Western, defined in Western feminism. And so gradually, just by listening to what people were saying and learning a lot more about the definition of feminism in Central and Eastern Europe and why the issues were very different, then I was accepted a lot more, because I wasn't the big bad Western feminist coming in here and telling people to do things. I was just presenting a side of Western feminism that was very different from what they had heard.
And now it is time to take a look at the astrological predictions for today. You know, Czech is an astrological country.
and it's a center, always has been, for astrologers. Some of the original predictions were done here in the Czech Republic. And if you walk around Prague, you will see the astrological symbols are everywhere. They're on the buildings in the Old Town Square. They're located on people's necks. Around this city, you'll see more necklaces with the astrological signs on them because people are very interested in it. As you know, Prague is a mystical city. Maybe that I walked away from this material realm looking for something spiritual. I really don't know. But almost every week, I had some strange coincidence or some strange experience that I would talk to my students about that had happened to me. And I can only think it's because there's something special about this city, that there's some kind of magic here. You know, the alchemists were here, the astrologers were here. This town is full of ghosts.
Where Prague's alchemists once searched for the formula that would turn base metals into gold, the ancient Charles University has a computer science laboratory which seeks to turn the new sciences into gold. Its Canadian director, Bruce Damer, sees a direct link between the alchemist's metal and the microchip.
We have a magic formula of 500 intelligent, motivated, hardworking young Czechs as undergraduates, and a great faculty, good training, classical math training, and industries moving into Bohemia. Another interesting thing is the heritage of this city, with alchemists in the castle, in those little houses in the castle. The strange thing is that the firm, which I belong to, the project is called the Elixir Project. And the firm was named that for 6 years, but it's just very strange. But it's true. In a way, we're mixing together some very strange components in a pot here, and we'll see what comes out. In this very building, there were Jesuit priests speaking arcane languages and making incantations and creating a mystical world. And this is, in fact, like a priesthood here, the computer scientists. And their effect is quite powerful in society, and no one can understand what they say. And they create magic. And you see it on television and in videos. In fact, we have a chapel here, which used to have a crucifix on the front wall, and the crucifix is no longer there, but there's a beam television unit that beams not the Holy Scriptures, but SIGGRAPH or graphics, very fantastic computer graphics, spinning cubes and balls and faces that are changing and morphing and those kinds of things on that wall, and the students are sitting there and being inspired by that. So they're being inspired by master alchemists to mix the next magic formula that will spread out across the world.
The personal alchemy works first. These young Praguers have formed an all-Czech American football team full of the new world's urge to grab the ball and run with it.
První len 1, 2, 3, 4, jo? To znamená, Pavle, do mezer, 0, 1, jo? Koncový, 1 ruda, ty koncovej.
Sleep through it, now you better sleep through again. Boys sound right and prominent now, like a storybook ending. I'm lost in your charms, I could waltz across Texas with you. Walk around your corner, lady, see so you're old. All joint and set circle left now. Maybe star right, one time around, ale
This is a regular Tuesday night square dance. It's the last one of the season of the M Separate Square Dance Group, which started shortly before the Velvet Revolution. And it's all Czechs except me and my wife. And they have taken up the fine American art of square dancing and are doing it much better than it's being done in America these days. I called it in 1991 the kinder, gentler place that George Bush promised America. And I went on the basis of things like the sounds of children in the playgrounds, the way dogs bark, and the way people treated each other. And oddly enough, just at about the time that it stopped being a kinder, gentler place, the Clinton campaign in America picked up that phrase and issued a release saying Prague, Czechoslovakia, not the U.S., is the kinder, gentler place. Well, it will shake itself out, but what's been created here will endure. This is the base. Enough of us will stay. I intend to live the rest of my life here. It'll probably be 5 years shorter than anyone else because of the environment and the diet, but the quality of life will be very entertaining for the next 30 years for me.
I don't mind the risks. If I lose it all, then I didn't have anything when I got here, so it doesn't make any difference. I mean, I came here with $400, so I've lived here for a year and a half off of that, so so far so good.
In the long run, when I think of in the long run in Prague, I think in clumps of 100 years or so forth. But even in the next 20, 30 years in Prague, if any city of these former Soviet bloc cities, or any city in Europe, can survive the onslaught of American culture, of Western culture, it's going to be Prague.
I think this is one of the best cities on earth. And it's a city at a crossroads. It's a city at, it's at a, what would you call it? It's like a fulcrum between East and West. You meet everyone here, coming through here, from South Asia, from Africa, from Western Europe, from Russia, from the US. They're coming through, they're sitting next to the monuments, and they're walking across the bridges. And so in a way, this city belongs to the world. So to live here is to belong to the world.
Well, that's it. It brings us to the end. And it's been a pleasure. I really am glad that you sat down in the cafe with me today to spend some time here in the Czech Republic to share our experience together in this beautiful place. I will see you next weekend. As always, this is Steve Fisher reminding you that to je hezky být důležitý, ale to je důležitější být milý, as the Czechs would say. Or in English, it's nice to be important, but hey, more important to be nice. Take care.